Non-students. So last class we looked into how we are contributing to global warming and what all we can do by reducing the population in this direction. So in effect, we also looked at how we can, by choosing energy efficient methodology at home, as shown here, um, we can reduce the energy consumption, switching on to green power, traveling, the best traveling methods as listed here. If you recall, last year in December, they had a climate summit, and you must have heard about Greta Thunberg, right? She's a small girl actually who um, um, she's pretty an ardent climate change activist um, who even sailed from her Sweden, country that she belonged to attend it in America. You must have heard about the way Trump had exited from the climate policy. Hopefully, the Americans' votes count and Biden might rethink bring America again back to the climate summit and help us solve the global warming in a big way. Um, Similarly, planting trees, improving the biodiversity, eating less meat and use less, shop less and use recycled things, have no more than, basically the population control and go to farmers market rather than buying frozen food, local food. This is what, in short, it's a very beautiful cartoon. It gives us a lot of input in the directions that we are actually looking at. So today we will look at the resettlement and rehabilitation of project affected population, the reasons, their issues, and the objectives. So resettlement and rehabilitation. People are forced to move out of their land due to both natural and man made disasters. So it depends upon population. So that's the reason why it actually comes under this topic, wherein you also look at the immigration and immigration of people when you calculate the population of a nation. Natural disasters like earthquakes, cyclones, tsunami will render thousands of people homeless, for that matter, even floods. Sometimes even force them to move and resettle in other areas. Similarly, developmental projects like construction of dams, roads, canals, and flyovers, they also displace people from there. So there is a nuclear leakage that happened in Japan, due to which millions of people were forced to leave the area for their safety. Um, Similarly, the resettlement refer to the process of settling again in a new area, as the name suggests. And rehabilitation means restoration to the former state that they were in before the um, resettlement happened. I mean, the previous place where they were living, how they were living, the same manner they should be living in the place where they are rehabilitated, which is not always, this is the ideal condition, which is not always true, that we all know. Reasons for displacement of people. Just like I said, earthquakes, cyclones, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, prolonged droughts conditions, floods, hurricanes, etc. Man-made disasters like industrial accidents like Bhopal tragedy, nuclear accidents, disaster in Japan, Chernobyl, oil spills, Exxon Valdez oil spill, toxic contamination of sites, etc. So, in search of better employment opportunities, also people get displaced. Similarly, developmental projects like construction of dams, irrigation canals, reservoirs, they need space. So normally, when they find space, they will clear the population from that area. Infrastructural products like flyovers, bridges, roads, etc. Transportation activities like roads, highway, canal. Energy related projects like power plants, soil exploration, mining activities, pipelines like HPG pipeline, etc. Agricultural projects related with the conservation of wildlife like national parks, sanctuaries, and biosphere reserves. These are certain other reasons why people are getting displaced in the world. As far as resettlement issues are concerned, as per the World Bank estimates, nearly 10 lakh people are displaced worldwide for a variety of reasons. So, displacement mainly hits the tribal and rural people who usually do not figure in the priority list of any political authorities or parties. So, there is no support from the government most of the time, little or no support at all. And you have meager compensation. The compensation for the land lost is often sometimes not even paid. It's delayed, or even if paid, it is too small. Both in monetary and social changes will force them by these mega developmental projects. Third one is loss of livelihood. Displacement is not a simple incident in the lives of displaced people. We know when we change a city, what happens, right? I don't know how far you will understand that, but once you start working other than the city that you are living in right now, you will understand that. But they have to leave their ancestral land or forest on which they depend on their livelihood. In this case, it is not even that. Case that I cited earlier, you can at least come back. But in this case, you cannot come back because it's a permanent displacement. Many of them has no skills to take up another activity or pick up another occupation. I'm talking about tribals here. Usually, a new land that is offered to them is of poor quality, and the refugees are unable to make a living there. You also have lack of facilities. When people are resettled in a new area, basic infrastructure and amenities are not provided in that area. Very often, temporary camps becomes permanent settlement sometimes. It's also a major problem of displacement or resettlement that people have to face. You must have seen that during the floods, 2018 floods, that some people could not go back to their home because for a longer time because they didn't have the home itself. It was completely destroyed. So these are like lack of facilities. Increase in stress, resettlement disrupt the entire life of the people. They are unable to bear the shocks of emptiness and purposelessness created in this. They become depressed basically. So, payment of compensation to the head of the family often lead to bitter quarrels, oversharing of compensation amount within the family, leading to stress and even withering of family life. Moreover, land ownership has a certain prestige attached to it, and this cannot be compensated for even after providing the new land sometimes. With the loss of property and prestige, marriage of young people also becomes very difficult as people from outside villages are not willing to marry their daughters to refugees. Next is increase in health problems. Why? Because lack of nutrition, obviously, due to loss of agriculture and forest based livelihood. It leads to general decline of health, and people are used to traditional home remedies, but herbal remedies and plants get submerged in the developmental projects like dams or mining. You also have secondary displacement like occupational groups residing outside the submergence area, but depending on the area for livelihood, also experience unemployment. It's not just the tribals, the village nearby also has these issues. The village artisans, petty traders, laborers, they also lost their living because they depend on the forest probably for the livelihood. Then there is loss of identity. Tribal life is actually community based, and the tribal are simple people who have a lifestyle of their own. Displacement have a negative effect on their livelihood, culture, and spiritual existence. In other words, breakup of families and communities are the important social issues of displacement. Women suffer the most as they are deprived of even little compensation. Intercommunity marriages, cultural functions, folk songs, and dances do not take place among the displaced people. When they are resettled, it is generally individual based settlement and this ignores a communal character. Resettlement increases the poverty of the tribal due to loss of land, livelihood, food insecurity, job skills, etc. Loss of identity of individuals and loss of connection between the people and the environment is the greatest loss in the process. The indigenous knowledge that they have regarding the wildlife and herbal plants are also lost by this particular thing. The land acquisition laws do not pay attention to the idea of communal ownership of property, which increases stress within the family. Tribal people are not familiar with the market trends, so prices of commodities and policies. So they will be exploited and get alienated in the modern era. These are the very important problems that resettlement will be facing. And what should be the objective of rehabilitation? The objective that should be kept in mind when you do this thing to people as an alternative when they offer being offered a alternative site of living. Tribal people should be allowed to live along the lives of their own patterns, and others should avoid imposing anything on them. You cannot say it is wrong or right in their this thing because that is the way they lived, and you should not be interfering into their day-to-day activities. That normally happens when they actually move from one place to another. They should be provided means to develop their own traditional art and culture in every way because you need to preserve them. Villagers should be given the option of shifting out with others to enable them to live a community based life. Removal of poverty should be one of the objectives of rehabilitation. People displaced should get an appropriate share in the fruits of the development. Like, for example, if they are being displaced, for building a dam, then definitely they should have a stake on it. The displaced people should be given employment opportunities. Resettlement should be in the neighborhood of their own environment. For example, I remember when I studied in IIT Kanpur, one of our lab assistants was actually a land owner of the place, the site where IIT was there. So, what the government did was a very interesting thing because it's a very good thing also. They were asked to go to the periphery of the place and in the uh, um, in response to what they gave their land they actually gave for building this um, wonderful institution. So what they did was they gave employment to one of the or the head of the family basically, even though he may not have actually studied much. He was given a government job, rather it's a central government job, which he will actually have the perks. So I remember he didn't even know how to read or write, but he used to draw like 15,000 of salary at that point of time. I'm talking about 2000s. And that's a pretty good, very big amount at that point. I'm sorry, I'm actually talking about 1990s, you know. He has been drawing that salary for a longer time. So that's one way of giving back. You know, the displaced people should be given employment opportunities, and resettlement again is done in the neighborhood of their environment. I was just reminded of the things when I was reading this. If resettlement is not possible in the neighbor area, priority should be given to the development of the irrigation facilities and supply of basic inputs for agriculture, drinking water, wells, grazing ground for of the cattle, schools for the children, primary healthcare units, and other amenities. Villages should be taken into confidence at every stage of implementation of the displacement and they should be educated through public meetings, discussion about legalities of the Land Acquisition Act and other rehabilitation provisions. The elderly people of the village should be involved in the decision making, obviously. Now we will look at the examples of resettlement and rehabilitation displacement due to dams. India has been constructing dams and other hydel projects in the last 50 years and 20 million people have been affected by the construction of such projects. Hirakud Dam displaced around about 20,000 people living in about 250 villages. Bakranangal, constructed around 1950s, displaced a huge number of people. Some of them could not be rehabilitated even today after probably 70, 80 years. they could not do much. So, displacement due to mining. India has been constructing dams and hydro projects, and sorry, this is continuation of what we told earlier. So, due to possibility of accidents or sinking of the land, people have to be displaced in and around mining area. Mining take place several hectares of land and thousands of people have to be evacuated. Jharia coal mines posed a problem years ago to the local residents due to underground fire. Some 3 lakh people were to be shifted and it became a problem to find an alternative site. A huge amount of money to the tune of rupees 115 crores has been spent to put out the fire. Still, the problem persists there. Displacement in Japan due to nuclear crisis. There was an explosion in 3 of the major reactors of Fukushima city due to tsunami in 2016. Currently, more than 2 lakh people have been displaced from their native place, and yet many are unable to find an alternative home. People were evacuated to protect them for the possible nuclear hazard and exposure. They were suffering from acute hunger as the food supply was interrupted due to contamination of food particles by radiation. Um, with this, I am shifting the gears. So these are the objectives, reasons, and the way that you can do the rehabilitation. And now we will look at the environmental movements of India. I'll just post another slide deck for this.